Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to start by just looking at your hand for a second.
Just literally look at your own hand.
Right, because you are looking at a cooperative society of about 30 trillion individual cells. And the crazy thing is, every single one of them is pre-programmed with a suicide switch.
Which sounds intense, but it's true.
It is. If they misbehave or if their internal machinery gets too damaged, they are strictly required to basically destroy themselves to protect you. So our mission for today's deep dive asks a rather terrifying question. How does a microscopic cell ever figure out how to disable that switch and go rogue?
And answering that, it requires completely dismantling our usual perspective on the disease. Because when a doctor delivers a cancer diagnosis, the natural human instinct is to view it as an external invader.
Yeah, like you've caught a cold or something.
Exactly. We feel like we've caught a virus or some alien force has just breached the gates of our immune system. But the reality that we are unpacking today is far more intimate and, in a way, far stranger. It is a rebellion from within.
Which really shifts the narrative completely. The whole goal for our deep dive today is to strip away the fear-inducing mystery of that word. By understanding the actual physical mechanics of what goes wrong at a cellular level, we can replace that terrifying unknown with clear, graspable biology.
Right, because to understand the rebellion, you first have to understand the incredibly strict laws of the land that keep your 30 trillion cell society functioning.
And those laws are strict.
They govern every moment of a cell's life. A lung cell stays in the lung, a skin cell stays on the skin. They don't wander around.
They have a designated spot.
They do. And more importantly, they only grow and divide when the body explicitly tells them to. So if you get a paper cut, skin cells divide to bridge the gap.
Okay.
But the very microsecond they touch another cell and that gap is closed, they receive a chemical signal to stop, and they immediately cease dividing.
Wow. And keeping that kind of order relies on that built-in safety feature we just talked about.
Yes, exactly.
The biological term for this programmed self-destruction is apoptosis. I just want to define that clearly. It's a genuine, heavily monitored safety protocol.
A total failsafe.
Right. So if a cell is exposed to too much radiation, or if its internal copying mechanism makes a critical error, the cell doesn't try to just limp along and cause problems. It actively triggers apoptosis. It basically falls on a sword for the good of the whole organism.
So if you think about it, for a cancer to develop, a cell must systematically dismantle all of those laws.
It has to actively break the rules.
Exactly. It has to ignore the stop growing signals from its neighbors. It has to refuse that apoptosis command. And to understand how a cell pulls off that kind of sophisticated rebellion, we have to look inside its command center. We have to look at the genes.
Okay, let's unpack this, because when most people hear the word genes, they think of inherited traits,
Right, like why you have your grandfather's nose.
Yeah, or your mother's eye color. But for our purposes today, we are talking about the day-to-day instruction manual operating inside a single living cell, telling it exactly how to behave.
Right, so think about those DNA instructions like the operating system of a car.
Oh, I like this analogy.
It works really well. So you have certain genes that function exactly like the accelerator pedal. They tell the cell to grow, multiply, and push forward.
And biologists have a name for those.
Yeah, they call these proto-oncogenes. But then you have another set of genes that act as the brakes, telling the cell to slow down, stop dividing, or fix any damage. These are your tumor suppressor genes.
Brakes and accelerators. Got it.
And finally, you have the dashboard warning lights and the mechanics. Those are the genes responsible for sensing critical damage and triggering that apoptosis self-destruct sequence.
So the rebellion begins when that instruction manual gets corrupted, when the physical instructions get damaged, which, just to define another term here, in biology, any damage or alteration to that DNA code is called a mutation.
Yes, and applying that to our car analogy brings the whole disaster into focus. A mutation might mean the accelerator pedal is suddenly jammed all the way to the floor.
So the cell is just getting a constant screaming signal to divide.
Exactly. And then maybe another mutation severs the brake lines entirely. And perhaps a third mutation disconnects the dashboard warning lights.
Oh, wow.
Meaning the cell has no idea how dangerous the situation has become, so it never initiates self-destruction.
The end result is just a cell entirely deaf to the rules of the body. It divides when it shouldn't, refuses to die, And most dangerously, it begins making copies of itself.
Copies that all carry that exact same corrupted code.
Right. Every single one of those new cells inherits the exact same jammed accelerator and cut brake lines.
It's terrifying when you break it down like that.
But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
If the body has 30 trillion cells, and they are constantly dividing to maintain our skin, our gut, our blood, random copying errors must be happening all the time.
They absolutely are.
So if it only takes a broken brake line and a jammed accelerator to start a tumor, why aren't we all just riddled with cancer by the time we hit our 20s?
Well, because biology is incredibly paranoid, and it relies heavily on redundancy.
Redundancy, okay.
Yeah. It is almost never a single mutation that causes the system to fail. You don't just have one brake line,
Yeah.
You have multiple backup brakes.
Okay, that makes sense.
You don't just have one warning light. You have an entire fleet of quality inspectors. A cell has to accumulate a highly specific, very unlucky combination of mutations before it can fully break free of all its restraints.
Ah, so it's a numbers game. You have to knock out several independent safety systems in the exact same cell.
Exactly, which perfectly explains why cancer is overwhelmingly a disease of aging.
Because it just takes time.
Right. Mutations pile up gradually over a lifetime. Every single time a cell divides, it has to copy billions of letters of DNA code. Occasionally, it just makes a typographical error. It's a pure mathematical probability.
And then you add to that the wear and tear of living. Environmental factors act like hazards on the road, increasing the chance of damaging the car.
Definitely.
Like ultraviolet light from the sun can physically break DNA strands. And the chemicals in tobacco smoke are notorious for directly mutating the genes that act as the cell's brakes.
Yeah, so the longer you live, the more cell divisions have occurred in your body, and the longer you've been exposed to those environmental hazards.
Right.
Therefore, there are simply more opportunities for that exact catastrophic combination of genetic errors to land in one single cell.
This brings up a point from our research that feels deeply necessary to highlight, because it lifts this enormous emotional burden.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
We are bombarded with messaging about risk factors.
Right.
What superfoods to eat, what toxins to avoid, how to optimize our lifestyles. And that messaging can inadvertently create a heavy sense of guilt when someone gets sick.
Yeah, this lingering whisper that they must have done something wrong to cause it.
Exactly. But the mechanics of cellular division completely dismantle that narrative. Because while smoking a pack a day obviously damages your DNA and heavily loads the dice against you, so much of this just comes down to the unavoidable hazard of being a complex organism.
Just the math of cell division.
Right. Random mutations happen during ordinary healthy cell division.
Right.
A person can eat perfectly, exercise daily, and avoid every known toxin, and still lose the biological lottery simply because one of their cells made a random copying error.
The biology removes the moral judgment entirely. Risk factors shift probabilities. They do not write your fate. Getting sick is very often nobody's fault. It is just the fragile nature of having 30 trillion cells constantly turning over.
That is so important to remember. Okay, so let's track the progression here. We have a cell that has accumulated enough random mutations to lose its brakes and jam its accelerator. It starts dividing uncontrollably.
It creates a mass of rogue cells, a tumor.
But a lump sitting in one place isn't necessarily a death sentence.
Yeah.
We all know a benign tumor is localized. It stays in its assigned neighborhood.
Right.
It might cause a problem if it grows large enough to press against a nerve or crowd an organ, but it isn't cancer in the lethal sense.
No, the existential threat requires a whole new set of mutations. True cancer is defined by its ability to invade.
Invade.
Yes. When a doctor uses the term malignant, they are describing a tumor that has developed the biological tools to actively break down boundaries.
And that transition is chilling when you look at it up close. Normal cells are basically glued together by a kind of cellular mortar.
Exactly.
But malignant cells mutate to produce enzymes that act like acid, digesting that connective tissue. They physically eat their way through the borders of their home organ.
And that digestion allows them to reach the body's superhighways.
The bloodstream and the lymphatic system.
Exactly. This is the mechanism behind the term metastasis. Metastasis is the migration. The rogue cells slip into the blood, ride the current to a distant location like the liver, the lungs, or the bones, and set up new, unauthorized colonies.
Wow.
That single ability to migrate is what turns a manageable local problem into a systemic crisis.
Which directly answers the most common question people ask when they aren't familiar with the biology. You hear it all the time. If there's a tumor, why can't the surgeon just cut it out?
Right, and if the tumor is benign or if it is a malignant tumor caught incredibly early before it has breached those boundaries, they absolutely can. Surgery can physically remove the threat.
But once metastasis occurs,
The cancer is no longer a single object. It is scattered across multiple organ systems. You cannot use a scalpel to remove thousands of microscopic colonies spread throughout the lungs and liver. The entire body is now the battlefield.
here is where the science gets genuinely staggering to me. If the cancer has spread through the blood, you would assume we could just introduce a chemical into the blood to hunt it down, right?
Right, that's the logical assumption.
Give the patient a drug that poisons those rogue cells everywhere they hide. So why is that so incredibly difficult to achieve?
It goes back to the instability of that corrupted instruction manual. The word cancer is singular, which tricks us into thinking it is one disease.
Oh, here's where it gets really interesting.
It really does. In reality, it is hundreds of distinct diseases wearing a single name. A cancer that originates in a breast cell has completely different mutations, behaviors, and vulnerabilities than one originating in the pancreas.
But our research pushes that concept even further. It's not just that lung cancer is different from bone cancer. The terrifying truth is that even within a single tumor, the cells are not identical clones of each other.
Right. Remember, these cells have disabled their quality inspectors.
Their DNA is highly unstable.
Exactly. As they continue to divide at a frantic pace, they keep acquiring new random mutations. A single tumor is actually a diverse, chaotic ecosystem. You might have one cluster of cells in the tumor with a certain genetic profile, and another cluster inches away with a slightly different set of broken instructions.
Which means a tumor is essentially evolution by natural selection, running on fast forward inside a single human body.
That is the perfect way to describe it. And that evolutionary speed is the exact mechanism that defeats so many promising treatments. It is why a patient's scans can look incredibly hopeful for 6 months, only for the disease to roar back stronger than ever.
Because the treatment itself acts as an evolutionary pressure cooker.
Yes.
Imagine a drug that is 99% effective. It sweeps through the body and brilliantly kills off almost the entire tumor. But within that chaotic ecosystem of millions of cells, maybe just one single cell had a random fluke mutation that altered its outer wall, making the drug bounce off harmlessly.
Exactly. That one cell survives the chemical bombardment, and now all of its competitors for space and nutrients are dead. It has the environment entirely to itself,
So it divides and divides and divides.
repopulating the entire tumor with a new generation of cells that are completely immune to the drug that just killed their ancestors. We aren't fighting a static target. We are fighting an actively adapting organism.
So, faced with a spreading, constantly mutating, highly adaptable threat, how does modern medicine actually fight back? What is the mechanism behind our weapons?
Well, historically, the medical arsenal has relied on 3 primary, rather forceful tools. Surgery, as we discussed, removes the localized threat.
Okay, what?
Then we have radiation therapy. This uses highly focused, intense beams of energy aimed directly at the tumor. The goal is to physically shatter the DNA of the cells in that exact location.
Because cancer cells are dividing so rapidly, their DNA is exposed.
Exactly, making them particularly vulnerable to being shredded by radiation. However, any healthy tissue caught in the crossfire takes collateral damage.
Which brings us to the third traditional pillar, chemotherapy, and the biological breakdown of how chemo works provides this massive aha moment for understanding its notorious side effects.
It really does.
Chemotherapy drugs are systemic, meaning they are pumped into the bloodstream to travel everywhere. But they aren't smart bombs. They don't know how to specifically identify a cancer cell.
Instead, most traditional chemotherapies rely on a very broad biological rule. They poison the physical process of cell division itself. Any cell caught in the act of splitting into 2 gets destroyed.
And this is highly effective against cancer because cancer cells are dividing relentlessly.
Right.
But the collateral damage is systemic. This is the exact reason why chemotherapy causes hair loss, mouth sores, and severe nausea. The drug isn't just hitting the tumor. It is hitting the cells in your hair follicles, the cells lining your mouth, and the cells lining your stomach and intestines.
Because those healthy tissues naturally have to divide very quickly just to maintain themselves. I mean, your stomach lining replaces itself every few days. Hair follicles are constantly producing new cells.
So they're just doing their normal healthy jobs.
Exactly. But because they divide rapidly, the chemotherapy poison targets them just as aggressively as the cancer. It is a blunt instrument.
A blunt instrument that has saved countless lives, to be clear, but one that is incredibly hard on the patient.
Which brings us to the revolution happening right now in oncology. We are finally moving away from carpet bombing the body and moving toward precision strikes.
Yes. The first major leap in that direction is targeted therapies. This is where we leverage our understanding of the specific broken genes inside a tumor.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Well, instead of poisoning all dividing cells, doctors can biopsy the tumor, sequence its DNA, and find out exactly which accelerator pedal is jammed.
Oh, wow. So if the tumor is completely dependent on one specific mutant protein to fuel its growth, scientists can engineer a chemical molecule designed to plug up that exact protein, like a key in a lock.
Yes, precisely.
It shuts down the cancer's growth engine while largely ignoring the patient's healthy cells because the healthy cells don't have that mutant protein.
It is elegant, precise biology, but the approach that is truly upending the field, the one that honestly feels like science fiction coming to life, is immunotherapy.
Yeah. This represents a fundamental shift in philosophy. Instead of trying to invent a synthetic drug to kill the cancer, immunotherapy focuses on empowering the patient's own body to do the job.
To understand how wild this is, we have to look at the immune system. Your immune cells are the body's heavily armed police force. They are constantly patrolling the bloodstream, checking the chemical IDs of every cell they meet.
Like a constant security sweep?
Right, and if they spot a virus, a bacteria, or a rogue mutated cell, their job is to execute it immediately.
So given how effectively the immune system handles threats, the obvious question is how a massive tumor manages to grow right under its nose.
And the answer is that the cancer evolves a disguise.
It's basically a deadly magic trick.
It's like a Jedi mind trick at the cellular level.
But a deadly one. Many tumors evolve the ability to produce a specific protein on their surface. A common one is called PD-L1. Think of it as a chemical "don't attack me" signal. When a ferocious immune cell approaches the tumor, ready to destroy it, the immune cell reads that signal. It gets confused, assumes the cancer is just a normal, healthy tissue, and essentially flips its own off switch.
The police officer walks right past the bank robber.
The cancer literally hits the brakes on the patient's own immune system.
So the brilliance of immunotherapy drugs is that they don't attack the cancer directly at all.
Not directly, no. These drugs are engineered to act like chemical blindfolds. They bind to the tumor, completely covering up that "don't attack me" signal.
Suddenly, the disguise drops.
Yes. The immune system can finally see the tumor for the massive foreign threat it actually is, and it attacks with an absolute ferocity that no synthetic drug could ever match.
The results we've seen from removing those immune brakes are staggering. For certain types of advanced cancers that were historically viewed as insurmountable, this mechanism has driven the disease into deep, long-lasting remissions.
It is truly remarkable.
We're seeing patients' own bodies clear the disease in ways that doctors decades ago wouldn't have dared to promise.
It is easily one of the most exciting frontiers in modern medicine. But navigating this topic requires a very careful grounding in reality.
Yeah, that's fair.
The biology demands that we balance optimism with hard facts, because this disease attracts both false despair and false hope in equal measure.
The reality being that immunotherapy doesn't work for everyone.
Far from it. Some tumors don't use that specific disguise, so unmasking them doesn't help. Some cancers create physical barriers that immune cells simply can't penetrate. These targeted strikes are massive breakthroughs. But because cancer is hundreds of highly adaptive diseases, there is no silver bullet.
Right. We have cured cancer isn't a headline we are going to read tomorrow.
The progress is undeniable, and survival rates for many types have dramatically improved. But the reality of this science is that victory is incremental. It is fought cell by cell, mutation by mutation. We must remain deeply skeptical of anyone selling a single miracle cure.
Summarizing everything we've explored today brings us back to that core shift in perspective. Cancer is not a monster hiding in the dark, and it is not an invading army. It is a rebellion born from the very mechanisms that give us life.
Right.
It's our own cells whose delicate internal instructions have been corrupted by time, environmental hazards, and the sheer mathematical probability of copying trillions of lines of code over a lifetime.
The rebellion thrives by ignoring the command to stop dividing. It becomes lethal by learning how to digest boundaries and migrate through the blood, and it resists our best efforts to destroy it by constantly mutating, evolving, and adapting to every weapon we throw at it.
Yet the more we map the intricacies of that rebellion, the better we become at fighting it. We're moving past the era of blunt poisons, learning how to snike the specific broken gears of the machine, and figuring out how to unblind our own immune systems to join the fight. Now, just a necessary reminder before we wrap up, our exploration today has been a journey through the fascinating, complex biology behind the disease. It is a general explanation of the science, not medical advice. If this disease touches your life or the life of someone you love, your medical team is your ultimate guide.
Our mission was to take a word that steals the air from a room and replace its terrifying mystery with a foundation of profound biological understanding.
And as we close this deep dive, there is one final provocative thought that emerges from all this biology, a paradox to mull over. We spent all this time detailing how cancer is a failure of our cells to follow the rules, specifically the rule that says they must eventually stop growing and die.
Right.
But in a strange, twisted way, a cancer cell is a masterpiece of survival. It is our own biology adapting too well, evolving too fast, and successfully achieving cellular immortality. It refuses to age, and it refuses to die.
That's an incredible way to look at it.
So, if the fundamental nature of this disease is so deeply intertwined with the mechanisms of cellular growth, survival, and aging, does the ultimate cure for cancer require us to do more than just invent better drugs?
That's the big question.
Does it require us to fundamentally unlock and perhaps even rewrite the absolute biological limits of human aging itself? It leaves you looking at your own biology in a completely different light. When we understand that the threat isn't a foreign monster, but just our own microscopic machinery in desperate need of repair, the paralyzing fear begins to fade, and true understanding takes its place.